Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Boston Balling. I'm your host, Gabby Hurlbut. Welcome to the Celtics back in the Eastern Conference Finals. We can all take a deep breath for, the next 24 hours until they play tomorrow night. Sunday had me really, really stressed out. I think I can speak for all of Celtics Nation when I say that. It was definitely been an emotional time for us Celtics fans watching that 7-game series go down with Philly. Fantastic series, some fun games involved in that series, but I'm really happy to see, the Celtics back to where they belong, which is in the Eastern Conference Finals, hopefully going past that this year, hopefully finishing the job this year. But definitely there's a lot of thoughts on it, a lot to talk about. I'm excited to bring you another episode of the show with a special guest that I have with me who it does very, very good basketball analysis, works for Celtics Blog, has his own Boston sports website too, where he's been, creating his own content really and making a name for himself within the Boston sports community, particularly NBA and basketball and the Celtics. Jared Zero, how are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you for having me, Gabby. I'm excited to be here.
Yeah, thank you so much for coming on. I really enjoy your, enthusiasm and your really strong analysis of the Celtics. So I'm definitely excited to have you on and hear some of your thoughts.
Yeah, no, my I think it is my enthusiasm, like you said. I don't know if you saw, I was on a little clip on TV after we beat the 76ers, and you just see me screaming into the camera. And
That's
it's just, yeah, it's one of those things. I've kind of ingrained myself into this lifestyle of being a Boston sports fan, but also looking at the Celtics objectively, right? Like, obviously I'm going to root for this team. I want them to win. I want them to do well, but I also can understand where they might struggle, where their shortcomings might be. And I'm not going to be one of those biased fans who are like, nope, Celtics are this, and this when it's something they're not. So the
yeah.
enthusiasm is there, but also, I'm a bit of a realist.
Yeah, no, you need to be, because obviously we all enjoy the Celtics winning, and Boston, as you know, has a very, very passionate fan base about the teams, which is fantastic. But we also need to really be able to recognize what the weaknesses are too, in order to, create a well-rounded team, because no team is perfect. So we know that there's going to be some flaws and some things that they really need to lock down on if they really want to go all the way this year. And I think there were some glaring things that we have seen so far from them in the playoffs that need to be improved. And obviously, there's a lot that I want to get into related to that. But first, I do want to react to some breaking news within the NBA world, which is the 76ers letting go of Doc Rivers. They just lost to the Celtics in this last series in 7 games. They've gotten to the Eastern Conference semifinals the past few years, but they've come up short of a title with him at the helm. What are your thoughts on that? Were you surprised that they let him go when they did, or did you more feel like it was coming if they didn't finish the job this year?
Personally, it wasn't shocking. I kind of did expect it. I expected them to move on from Doc Rivers. It was kind of the same thing that happened when he was with the Clippers. They never really made it over that hump, and they let him go. And it comes to Philly, he has Joel Embiid. They get James Harden. They had Ben Simmons. And the one thing I do want to say is I feel more bad for Doc Rivers than anything. While I think a lot of people did expect this to come, it's not his fault that James Harden quit on him, right? It's not his fault Ben Simmons quit on him, right? And I got to give credit to Joel Embiid. He won the MVP and 2 weeks removed from a grade 2 LCL sprain, and he's doing what he can. And by the end of game 7, he couldn't run up the court. And it was very apparent that injury was catching up to him. And all of these factors are not Doc Rivers' fault, but everybody's speculating James Harden's going back to Houston. And I think it is time for a change in Philly. I don't think Doc Rivers deserves as much of the criticism as he's getting.
I would agree with you. I think, Doc Rivers is a fantastic coach. Obviously, when you look at the 76ers roster, that is a team that has the capability to win a championship. It's not like they lack the talent, and they do have those guys in, Embiid and Harden that should be able to kind of be your two main guys to help lead your team to a championship run. And, when you look at the 76ers team, they're just as talented as anybody else in the Eastern Conference that, is there. And, we as we saw, they did give the Celtics trouble, and that series really went down to the wire and genuinely could have gone either way. And, Embiid, being named MVP of this season, which I think is well deserved. He had a really, really good season this year, and he put his heart into that series. And, James Harden, obviously for him, it's got to have been a frustrating road for him in terms of, past situations that he's been in, and he comes to Philly and thinks that might be, it for him. He can be on a team where he can really be a leader for that team and help take them all the way. And obviously, he was phenomenal in game one of the series, had a couple really, really strong games against the Celtics. But you look at Doc Rivers and, the way that he coaches, and there were a lot of people that were saying, I think he's in the hot seat. I think if this team doesn't get over that hump that they've been stuck in the last few years, he is going to take the blame. And I think it's easy when the team's not performing well to place the blame on the coach. And I think we see that a lot, where the coach ends up getting most of the blame for the team's failures. But if the team is performing well, a lot of times the coach isn't credited enough. And I think this actually could be the case with Miami. I think Spoelstra is a great coach, and I don't think that he gets enough credit for his coaching. And I think that's a huge reason why they're back in the Eastern Conference Finals again, despite being the 8th seed this year. But when it comes to Doc Rivers, I did have a feeling too that, if they lose in this series, I think he's out. I do wonder what the leash was, though, because if they make it to the Eastern Conference Finals and lose, I wonder if they would see that as more of an accomplishment because they failed to get there, or if their mentality was more, it's championship or he's out.
Honestly, I think a lot of it has to do with just the fact they were up 3-2. I think if they make the Eastern Conference Finals, whether they make it out of the Eastern Conference Finals or not, I think, they keep Doc. But I think it's just the idea of being up 3-2, losing a game 6 at home, and what was a nail biter where, and I know we're going to talk about it in a little bit, but Jason Tatum not scoring basically for the first 3 quarters and then hitting them with a barrage of threes in the fourth. I think, having a game come down to that much of a nail biter, not being able to close out and then getting blown out in game 7, I think was really kind of the tipping point. I think if the Celtics had gone in and beat them 4-1, 4-2 pretty convincingly, I think maybe they still keep Doc and try again one more time. But, you're up 3-2, you're going back to Philadelphia. You have to close out that series. And I think that's kind of where that turning point was for ownership to be like, okay, well, we were in the spot to go to the Eastern Conference Finals and you failed twice. So I think that
that's a really good point. After they won game 5 in Boston, I was starting to get really nervous because I was like, we saw this happen last year with the Celtics. They went down 3-2 to Milwaukee and then they came back and won the series, but it almost felt a little bit different this year. And I think, I was getting really nervous about that because I was like, obviously Harden and Embiid are hungry, so they're going to want to go home and close out the series. But then when they failed to close out game 6, I was like, now all the momentum is back in the Celtics' hands. And now they get to go home in front of their home crowd for game 7. And I just felt like it would have been really, really hard for Philly to win on the road again, especially in a game 7 situation. Because obviously we saw them win in Boston and they showed that they were capable of winning in Boston. And I think they were riding a really huge high from sweeping the Nets. But the Nets, to me, were, once they lost their key pieces that they really needed to kind of fuel them in the right direction this year. With the whole thing with Kyrie and KD, once that all happened, I didn't really see the Nets as a true contender anymore. So I think that was more of a series that didn't really expose any of Philly's weaknesses. And then they face a Celtics team that genuinely is evenly matched with them. And, they have to be playing their best basketball, and they were forced to do that on a nightly basis. Same with the Celtics. But I think, going home, they had to close out that series in game 6. When they didn't, I was like, I think this is going to be really tough for Philly to have to go back to Boston in an elimination game and then, try to win. Cause that to me was that to me, I feel like, when Tatum went off in the fourth quarter of game 6, and that is the reason they ultimately won that game. That's when I started to feel more like, okay, I think the Celtics actually will win this series now.
Right. And what's funny is I'll shout out one of my friends really quick. Her name's Lauren. After game 5, when we had lost, I was talking to her, and weirdly enough, I wasn't upset. Like, usually I'll get upset and kind of go try to figure out what the Celtics did wrong when they lose. And it was just game 5 was awful display of basketball for the Celtics. They just didn't show up. But after they lost, I was confident. I did not think the Celtics were going to lose in 6 games. And I told her, I'm like, if you think that Marcus Smart isn't going down without a fight, you're an idiot. And he comes out in game 6 and leads the way for the team. And there was some part of me that knew that that wasn't going to be the end. And it's because you said it last year, we were in the same position against Milwaukee, down 3-2. Milwaukee was a better team last year than Philadelphia was this year.
Yes.
And, Tatum had a big game in game 6. Grant had a big game in game 7. We beat Milwaukee. This was the first time all season we've actually seen this Celtics team with their backs against the wall. That was something everybody was talking about all of last year. After the All-Star break, what are the Celtics going to do? They're a below 500 team. They might not make the play-in. And they played with their backs against the wall and got to the 2nd seed in the East. Then you fast forward to this season, and we kind of just waltzed through the regular season as a 57-win team. And if the Celtics didn't goof off, they're a 60, maybe 65-win team. And now...
Yeah, there were some bad losses in there.
There were. And the fact we still finished with a much better record than we did last year was incredible. So we never really saw that sense of urgency from the team. So when we went down 3-2, that's when I said, okay, this is where the Celtics are really going to show if they're the same team from last year or if they're going to fold. Because people were comparing it left and right, ready to jump ship. Oh, the Celtics are out of it. The Celtics are going to lose. We don't know that. We don't know if they're going to come with that same energy that they come with whenever they're facing adversity. And they, proved that they do still have that same mentality as they did last year.
Yep. Yeah, no, it's so true. And I think, when you look at the Celtics now, obviously going into the season, there were a lot of unknowns with, the whole Ime situation, and just there were a lot of distractions going on in the offseason with the Celtics. So who was going to be the coach? What was that process going to look like for them? After Ime got them to the finals last year, are they going to bring in a coach that is going to be able to do the same thing and coach them, in the same way? And so going into the season, I was a little skeptical because I was like, this could be a distraction for the guys on this team, the unknowns of all of this, but they didn't show that at all. Obviously, they came out guns blazing at the beginning of the season, and they, won a bunch of games early on, and they were looking really, really dominant at home. I was like, this is fun. Like if this is how it goes all season, like this is going to be a super enjoyable season of Celtics basketball to watch. And obviously we knew, they're too talented to not be in contention. And what Malcolm Brogdon has done for the team this year has been huge, and a huge reason why they are where they are too. I mean, him off the bench is just a fantastic piece to add to this team. But when it comes to Joe Mazzulla, obviously him being in his first year as a head coach, there are some in-game decisions that he's made that I think have thrown off people in terms of, not calling timeouts down the stretch in games. We've seen that happen here in the playoffs. That game, one of the games against Philly, and, they ended up losing in overtime, and Joe Mazzulla's, timeout management and clock management was poorly managed at the end of regulation and at the end of overtime. And that was a game that I was like, if they lose this series, I'm going back to those two moments. And I'm saying, he poorly managed those situations. So from a coaching standpoint, how do you feel like he's been, and do you trust him to be able to really be that coach that can take them all the way?
Honestly, I love Joe Mazzulla. When everything kind of went down with Ime and we were trying to figure out who the next coach was, and they put Joe Mazzulla as the interim, I was excited. Anybody that knows me can tell you that I was super excited for Joe because of the way the players have talked about him, right? It's not often you hear players unprompted talk about their head coach. And when guys like Jason Tatum and Jaylen Brown are praising this guy just out of the blue, it really instills that kind of confidence, right? Now, you're right. He is a rookie head coach. Obviously, there are going to be those kind of, we'll call them growing pains, right, as the season goes on. And I'm going to compare game 4, the one you're talking about where we lost in overtime, to game 5 against Atlanta, right? We're down 2 points. Trae Young just hit the big three. Joe Mazzulla calls the timeout. Out of the timeout, the Celtics don't get a shot off. They turn the ball over. We lose the game.
I was at that game 5 against the Hawks,
I
unfortunately,
was too.
so I was getting very, very, very angry in those last few minutes.
Yeah, I was there as well. I was not the happiest, but so when you go into game 4 against Philadelphia, right? You also have to think back to last year, game 1 against Brooklyn. Ime did the same thing. We're down 1 point with, I think it was 15 seconds left, and Jason Tatum hits that spin move on Kyrie, lays it up and in, and we win with 0 seconds left on the clock.
That was nuts.
We lost game 4 by 0.1 seconds of Marcus not getting that shot off in time. So I don't know if it's fair to say that was necessarily an error, given that, something Ime did worked, right? Or in game 5 of Atlanta, calling that timeout, not getting a shot off, right? Just kind of in those similar moments. But yeah, there definitely has been growing pains with Joe Mazzulla, but I think he's an incredibly talented coach. His coaching style is something that the players have responded to. And it's something that I don't think a lot of people take into account. The Celtics have had 3 head coaches in 3 years. Getting star players like Jason Tatum, Jaylen Brown to buy into 3 different systems 3 years in a row is hard.
Yep.
And whatever Joe Mazzulla has done inside of the locker room that we don't hear about, because he's very, witty when it comes to the post-game pressers, and, he's very standoffish with the media. So we don't see what he's saying behind the scenes in the locker room. But whatever it is the players are responding to it and they're listening to him. And we saw it on display in game 7 when Joe Mazzulla comes out to yell at Bill Kennedy about the missed calls, and he's yelling at Scott Foster. And Marcus is sitting there like, hey, like, calm down, patting him on the chest. You know what I mean? You don't see that a lot with other teams and their coaches. So I'm all 100% in on Joe Mazzulla. I think he has the capability to bring the Celtics to the finals. I think he has the potential to be a championship caliber coach. A lot of people are saying that if the Celtics don't win the finals this year, that this season is a bust. I disagree with that for numerous reasons. But, I obviously would be disappointed. They're in an amazing position to win it this year. Yes. But winning a finals is hard.
Yeah.
So, I'm all in on Joe Mazzulla. I think the logic of letting the guys figure it out in crunch time early on in the season has been hugely helpful, because in the clutch this year, I think our record is something like 25-13 compared to a near 500 last year. Yeah. So we've been better in the clutch with Joe Mazzulla telling the guys, hey, go figure it out.
Yeah, it can be a tough call in certain situations, because part of me is like, oh, he should, call a timeout so they can actually draw up a play and figure out something to do. But at the same time, you don't want to, like, ruin the momentum either. And if the team is out there, they're the guys on the court and they're aware of what's going on. And if you have Tatum and Brown out there, it's hard to not want to trust those guys to be able to just be alert and be like, this is what we should do in this situation. We should get, the ball to Tatum to go for that layup, or, maybe feed it out to Marcus or to Al to try to hit a three, or just whatever the situation may be. It really shows me that he trusts his players and that he feels like they can figure it out on their own, and that they don't necessarily need him to call a timeout in all those situations to draw up a play, because that also allows Philly to be able to set up a defense and be able to prepare themselves for the play too. So in a way, it's, you benefit from not calling the timeout, because then Philly doesn't have a chance to set anything up on their end either. So there's definitely, I think, risks involved with not doing it, but I also can understand the logic as to why he might not have done it.
Right. And it's one of those things where hindsight is always 2020, right?
Yep.
You lose a game on a last second shot that doesn't go in, or it does, and you just miss the buzzer, whatever it is, you're always going to look back and say, oh, I should have done this differently. But in the moment, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. There were people crucifying Joe Mazzulla for not calling that timeout. And then you hear people in the media saying he was right not to call it. So, like I said, stuff like that's always going to be sort of the hindsight 2020 type thing. But I think up until now, he's done fantastic. I think given Tatum's performance in Game 6 and then the Celtics' performance in Game 7, I think he coached those two games perfectly. And, to put it in baseball terms, I think he pitched a perfect game,
Yeah. I like the baseball analogy.
Yeah, so like it's hard to count against Joe Mazzulla. Like, I know he's young, but he's just one of those guys where you listen to him talk about the sport of basketball, and he has such a knowledge about the game where his basketball IQ, I think, is kind of off the charts sometimes. So, I don't know how he's going to fare against the Eric Spoelstra. I think the Celtics are a more talented team, but Eric Spoelstra is probably the best coach in the league right now.
Yes.
Maybe behind Popovich. So.
Yeah, it's, I'm looking at that series against Miami, and from a team standpoint, if I'm just taking head to head, team versus team, the Celtics are clearly the better team, and they should be able to win that series pretty easily just based on roster to roster. But like you said, Spoelstra is a great coach. I mean, he's gotten that team to this position numerous times. So he definitely knows what he's doing, especially when it comes to coaching in the playoffs. So he is going to have that team ready, and he is going to have them prepared. I still do believe the Celtics win that series in 6 games, but I do think based on coaching alone, I think that he gets that team to make it a more competitive series, and that they do take a couple games.
Oh, 100%. I've been saying Celtics in 6 since, we found out we were going back to the Eastern Conference Finals. And, Jimmy Butler is Jimmy Butler. He's going to score his points. He's going to do what he does. And he's an electric player. He is one of those players that every time you watch him, he's usually pretty incredible. Bam Adebayo, he's a great center, The thing about the Miami Heat, though, that gives me a little bit more peace of mind in the Celtics winning in 6 is they're not the same team from last year.
They have injuries, too.
Miserable last year in the Eastern Conference Final. Had his hands all over him. Tatum could never get comfortable. Victor Oladipo was great at, shutting down Jaylen Brown from time to time. Neither of those guys are in Miami right now. Well, Victor Oladipo is out injured.
Yep.
Tyler Hero was their second leading scorer. He's out for what could be the remainder of the Eastern Conference Finals.
Yeah, which is a huge loss for them.
Right. So now you're relying on guys like Duncan Robinson, who, I hate to say it, he's a traffic cone on defense. You can blow by him pretty easily. Yeah, he's a talented shooter, but he might not hit all of he's not going to hit all of his threes. Sure, he might shoot 30, 35%, maybe 40% in a game. But if he's giving up just as many points on the defensive end, it's not going to do much. and Kevin Love isn't the Kevin Love that was in Cleveland.
No.
He's shooting 33% from three. So people are talking about how do the Celtics defend the Heat? They have all these shooters. Well, the Heat only shot 30% from three in the regular season. They're up to 36% in the postseason. So it's just like all these little kind of intangibles that I'm really confident in. Like, we've seen it time and time again. The Celtics they get comfortable. They, kind of lose focus. That's where I expect Jimmy to punch us in the mouth.
Yep.
That's where they steal a game, but I have trouble seeing this going past 6. So I'm taking Celtics in 6 all the way.
Yeah, it sounds like we're on the same page there. Obviously Miami's a talented team. They've played really good basketball in the playoffs so far. I don't think anybody really expected them to get past the Bucks. And then, when they play the Knicks, I even thought the Knicks ultimately were going to end up taking that series at the end of the day too. So they've definitely surprised people, but ultimately I think they're going to hit a Celtics team that ends up being too much for them. And they won't be able to handle it enough to the point where they're going to be able to make it past 6 games. So I'm with you on that. But what I will say about the Celtics, and you brought this up a little bit earlier, is the inconsistency. And just the fact that they do take the foot off the gas. Sometimes we've seen it time and time again, especially in the third quarter of games where they'll come out of halftime with a lead. They'll take the foot off the gas and they'll let the other team back in it. This happened a lot against the Hawks in that series.
Right.
And, Philly against Philly, it happened numerous times too. And I think, they need to maintain that mentality for that entirety of the 48 minutes, they're going to stay focused and locked in, because the Celtics at their best, I really believe, can beat anybody. And they should be able to beat anybody. And the way that they played in game 7 against Philly makes them look unstoppable. But then, you can't have other games where people are scrapping for shots or not making anything, or you're just not locked up on defense, because they haven't really been locking in on defense for a lot of the playoffs so far. And I think that's something that I'd like to see them be better with moving forward, is the defensive side on the ball. And also, obviously, we've mentioned his name already a bunch of times, is Jason Tatum. There have been some inconsistencies with him. The question is starting to become, is he that guy that you can rely on consistently to be your guy in the crunch time? A lot of teams have that one guy that they look to that's going to take those big shots that you need, down the stretch in crunch time, that can hit that shot that you trust to have the ball. I think there are Celtics fans that are starting to feel like maybe that isn't Tatum's role. I think Jaylen Brown has had a phenomenal playoff so far, and he's really stepped up and been the leader for this team that he needs to be. But, the question becomes, obviously, Tatum shut up a lot of people in game 7 after the well-deserved criticism that he got for his first 3 quarters of game 6. But the question for me really is he, is he really that guy that you can rely on consistently? Because they do need him to be, in order to, go all the way. And I think there's a lot of pieces around him, but I think he wants to be that guy. But are there situations where he's just not ready for that moment, or it just doesn't want to take those shots when he needs to? So I am curious what your insight is on that, because, he really was not scoring a lot in some of these games. And I think it is easy to say, because he wasn't scoring, he wasn't contributing, which wasn't the case, because he was contributing in other ways in those games where he wasn't scoring. Like, he was making an impact on the other side of the floor, which is also important. And I think people tend to disregard that a little bit, because it's not all about his offense. Like, he is contributing in other ways, but obviously shooting is one of his strengths. So he needs to be able to, step up and make some of those big shots and lock in.
Yeah. And you kind of just hit the nail on the head, right? Tatum, even when he's not scoring, is playing great basketball. And it's what I would call growth in him, right? If we see this last year where he goes, 0 for 11 in the first half, he comes out last year and starts turning the ball over, gets sloppy, And, he just has a bad game. And I think we saw a little bit of that in game 4. He struggled to shoot a little bit in game 4 up until, you know, and up until the second half where he kind of started going off. But I think he realized, like, hey, even if I'm not making my shots, I got to contribute to the team. And he picked it up on defense. He's getting the rebound, getting the assist. He's getting the ball to the guys that are open. And, game 5 rolls around, it's the same thing. And I mean, that was a sloppy effort on everybody's part, right? But, Tatum, he's been consistently great on defense. He's been consistently great at rebounding the ball. He's averaging 11 rebounds a game in the playoffs. That's crazy.
Yeah.
When Embiid is averaging 8 and Jason Tatum's averaging 11, that's crazy to me. So he's always giving that second and third effort. And we really saw it kind of take off in game 6. One person who I don't think gets enough credit is Marcus Smart. He is one of the best clutch and crunch time players this postseason.
Oh, yeah.
He's shooting more efficient than Tatum, has 23 points compared to Tatum's 26 in crunch time. And he's been fantastic. And that's because, Tatum has these guys around him. And the term that the Celtics love to throw around is love and trust, right? They love and trust each other to be able to, I'm having an off night. If I get the ball to Marcus, if I get the ball to Jalen, I trust them to make the right play. I trust them to get the shot, right? So we saw that in game 6. Tatum could not hit a shot to save his life. Marcus stepping up, play after play after play. When he stripped Embiid in game 6 and took it down and, hit the layup, that was my turning point in that game where I was like, the Celtics aren't losing. The second I saw Marcus do that, like, there's no way Marcus is letting this team lose. We get to the 4th, Tatum is starting to hit his shots, and one after another. He hit that first 3. I looked at my friend and I said, he's not missing another one tonight. And he proceeded to hit 3 more in a row. And
yeah, you could tell he was locked in at that point on offense.
Right. And that was the thing, is like, when you have a guy who's not shooting well, right? And I'll bring it over to the Warriors, right? Talk about the Warriors for a second. When Jordan Poole's not shooting well, or Klay Thompson's not shooting well, those guys aren't saying, keep shooting, you'll get it. They're saying, no, give me the ball, I'll do it, right? Like, whether it's Steph demanding the ball, or, Klay's demanding the ball because Jordan's not shooting well, or, whatever it might be, or, Andrew Wiggins is saying, let me get to the rim, you guys can't hit a 3. You have the entire Celtics team telling Jason Tatum, keep shooting, you're going to get your shot. And it's the same thing with Al. Al was struggling to hit 3s in a bunch of the games. And it was, keep getting your good looks, keep shooting. Eventually, it's going to come back to the mean, right? Where you're going to hit those shots. You're going to get your points. So once Tatum was able to stay locked in defensively, create plays for everybody else, so that by the time he was able to hit his shots, everybody else was able to create plays for him, because now he has everybody else around him scoring. That opens it up for him. You know what I mean? So I do think Tatum is that guy. He is the guy to get us, over that hump. I think he's a Celtic for life. And I just don't understand where people are coming from saying, oh, Tatum, he doesn't have that killer instinct. He's not this or he's not that. I mean, time and time again, he is coming up in these big moments. 5 minutes away from losing your season, and he drills 4 straight 3s to send you guys to a game 7. And then he walks in to game 7 and puts up 51 after last season putting up 46 on the road. There's not a single person on this earth that can tell me that Jason Tatum isn't clutch.
Yeah, it's that game 7 performance was phenomenal by him. And I was like, you go, Tatum, like, way to shut up all the haters now. But, everything you just said, though, about, everybody else contributing and doing their jobs too. It really, really speaks to the depth that the Celtics have. And that's what really, really makes them what they are and puts them in the position that they're in now, because they don't need Tatum and Brown to do everything, because they have a lot of solid other playmakers on this team who are going to help create plays when they need to and help, get good looks on offense and be able to contribute in the way that they're supposed to be contributing. And you don't find that with every team, because a lot of people do say, yeah, the Celtics have depth, but it really, really is true, because they're able to utilize people in different ways and they don't need to always rely very heavily on Tatum and Brown for everything. And, I mentioned him earlier, Malcolm Brogdon. I mean, that was such a great signing by the Celtics. I mean, go Brad Stevens on that one. He's been just a perfect addition to this team, and what he's been able to do off the bench has really, really, in my opinion, helped put this team above a lot of other teams in the league right now, because he's just somebody who you're going to get productivity from on any given night off the bench, and he's just been just one of my favorite players on this team to watch.
I 100% agree. I've loved Malcolm Brogdon ever since he got drafted into the league. I've been a huge Brogdon fan. When I was driving home, when I got the notification we traded for Brogdon, I pulled over. I called my friend. I started freaking out. I was like, "Oh my god, we just got Malcolm Brogdon!" And I was ecstatic. And to your point, what he offers to this team is so much more than just what he does with the basketball, right? He has that sort of, I can't even say sort of, he has that veteran swagger about him, and he's only 29 or 30, right? He has that swagger about him where the team needs to calm down, put Malcolm Brogdon in. We saw it so many times in the regular season. The Celtics are getting ahead of themselves. They're turning the ball over. They're not hitting their shots. They're kind of playing a little too fast. Brogdon comes in, pace immediately slows down, and then he starts saying, "It's my turn." And then he goes off for 14, 15 points. And half the shots he's hitting are like circus shots. Like you look like, how are you twisting your body to get that layup? And like the easy ones he's missing, which is kind of baffling to me. But he's been outstanding. And I don't know if you saw the quote he had said earlier, but people were asking him about, making that sacrifice to be the sixth man. And he was talking about, honestly, this was the best situation for him and the easiest one for him to make that decision, to make that sacrifice. He's like, yeah, it's not great having to sacrifice like that when you've been a starter your whole career. He's like, but the way these group of guys have welcomed me in here, the culture that we have here, the way that everybody is off the court, behind the scenes where people don't see it. He's talking so much about just how tight knit and the team chemistry where we don't see it, that made his decision that much easier. And the fact that, now he's has the chance to compete for a title and he's on a team that is consistently going to be a contender, and I think Malcolm realizes this and he kind of uses that to his advantage, right? He's like, the other part of it too is his health. As a starter, he never really played a full season. I think he was averaging like 63 games a year, whereas coming off the bench, he's able to play far more and he's playing less minutes so he can stay healthier, knock on wood. But it's also like the fact that he can average 20 points a game off the bench is just incredible for this team. And what he brings is like a personality, I think, is huge.
Yeah, there really was, just not even a close race, in my opinion, for sixth man of the year. I think he just resembles everything that goes into what that title means. And I think, there is nobody, in my opinion, this season more well deserving of that than him. I think he just makes such a difference for this team. And like you said, his attitude and how he is off the basketball court, which is just as important and kind of goes a little more without being talked about, is also something I think that, being able to have that attitude to help lift team morale when, things might be going a little bit south, or being able to say, hey, we got this, like we can do this. And, Tatum, the first 3 quarters of game 6, I'm sure he was feeling a little bit discouraged about his offense. And then, obviously people said something to him. And I'm sure Missoula said to him, like, look, kid, like, we love you, like you're important here, and making people feel valued. And I think
Right.
Brogdon and his presence is just so huge for some of the younger guys on this team. Because you do need, the veteran presence there. And I think that him being here is huge from that standpoint as well. Um, but obviously this team has so much talent, and like we said, is capable of going all the way. What do you see as kind of the biggest obstacles or challenges for them, based on what we've seen so far in the playoffs, that you're looking out for moving forward in the rest of this postseason?
Honestly, I think it's just them not getting in their own way. Um,
Yes.
I
Yes.
I don't think right with the 4 teams left in the playoffs, the Nuggets, the Lakers, the Heat, and us. I don't think there's a single team, and even when the playoffs first started, round one, I didn't think there was a single team in the playoffs that could beat the Celtics in 4 games or 7 games, 4 times,
Yeah. Yeah.
except for the Celtics. The Celtics are the only team that can beat themselves as
They do.
consistently as they do.
Yeah, it's so true.
Um, I think this past series in the against the 76ers really kind of opened their eyes. At least I'm hoping. I'm hoping that they say, okay, we stumbled over our own feet a couple of times. Um, we came out completely flat in game 5. These are the things we have to fix. We just have to go in with that sense of urgency every single game. And again, I'm going to go back to something I had mentioned earlier. It kind of contributes to that maturity, like we saw with Tatum, but I think it's been spreading to the whole team where, you know, game 6, I think, against the 76ers, I think is the perfect example. Things aren't going right, but you're not letting that get to you anymore, right? Whereas before they let that get to them and they lose. So I think it's even when the things aren't going correct, and I think when, um, you know, the team isn't doing what they want to do, just focusing on the next play is the most important, and not thinking like, oh man, this ref missed this call, or I turned the ball over, I'm an idiot. They can't think like that, and they have to just stay out of their own heads and just keep looking forward. That I think is the biggest key to what's going to be their success, because the 3 teams left in the playoffs they've beaten in the regular season. They've
Yeah.
proven they can beat them. It's not going to be easy, but I don't see how any of these teams beat the Celtics 4 times unless the Celtics beat themselves. So that's
Yeah.
probably my biggest thing, is just, when the water's a little rough, you just got to ride it out.
Yeah. Yeah, because when you see them, forcing all these, like stupid turnovers, or getting bad looks and just tossing up a 3 and rushing a play when there's no need to, little things like that is all on them. That's all them in their heads.
Right.
Like, okay, guys, let's, like you said before, slow down the pace a little bit and actually, move the ball around and look for the best shot that we can get off here, as opposed to feeling like they just need to toss up whatever the first shot is that they see, if it's an open look, and just being able to um, play basketball the way that they know how to play, because it does get really, really frustrating when we're seeing them, commit all these turnovers or do make these little stupid mistakes that that they're capable of not making, but they're just getting in their heads too much, and you're like, this team is so much better than this. Like, what are we doing?
Right.
And I think, that primarily is ultimately what stretched out the Philly series for as long as it did. I think they were capable of winning that series in 5 or 6 games, and they just, they beat themselves a lot, and it kept Philly in it. And I think,
Right.
it's definitely something that they're going to have to be aware of going forward. But like you said, this is the best team out of all the teams remaining. I mean, they should win the whole thing and be able to win the whole thing. But obviously, like you said, it's hard, and there's a lot of talent on other teams that could
Right.
capitalize on mistakes, and it's going to be challenging. But I think that as long as they stay mentally focused and mentally tough, they should be able to do it. You know,
And you're 100% right. And I think, we're going to see a lot of that in this Eastern Conference Finals matchup with the Heat. Because personally, I've been saying this. I thought whoever won the Philadelphia Celtics series was going to the finals coming out of the East and probably winning the
yeah,
championship. Denver's a great team, right? Denver is phenomenal. The Lakers have really been an underdog story all year, and what they're doing is pretty incredible. And same with Miami, right? But it comes down to, you look position to position. And yeah, if we face the Nuggets in the finals, Jokic is one of the best players in the world. Two-time MVP, almost
it's fun.
three-peated. He's incredible. He is absolutely incredible. LeBron, Anthony Davis on the Lakers. Back to the Nuggets, Jamal Murray. Like, these guys are superstars.
Yeah.
Jamal Murray coming off of an injury and everybody doubting him ever since the bubble and is now doing what he's doing has been great. Same thing with Jimmy Butler, right? Everybody, the Heat aren't great. Butler said, okay, hold on. I'm going to turn this into my team, and this team is going where I want them to go.
Yeah.
I just think there is a point where it comes, you look at the Celtics and how they can defend against the Heat with the double big lineup, or even if you throw Derek White in there and have Rob coming off the bench. I think both lineups can defend against Miami incredibly efficiently, depending on, their rotations, that's where it's going to come down to that coaching matchup. But I think both lineups have a great chance of defending Miami really well. You bring it over to the Lakers. The Celtics just have more depth, right? Far more depth than the Lakers. And, as talented as a lot of those guys are, they're not the most consistent, right? We've seen it in the Memphis series. We saw it against Golden State. They've won. They've made it. It was a dogfight. And I kind of want to touch upon something you talked about earlier with Miami against Milwaukee and against the Knicks. I knew Miami was beating Milwaukee. I knew it from the start. Milwaukee did not scare me. And the reason why is if you were to go back and look at their crazy win streak that they had post All-Star game break, they didn't face any fully healthy teams. And when they did, they lost, right? So they come into the playoffs. Miami's fully healthy. And Milwaukee says, okay, sure, we'll take you on. They lose in 5. And it was just very telling that was kind of the trajectory for them. And then the Heat came back down to earth. For the waxing they gave Milwaukee, they should have had no problem with the Knicks. And the Knicks still pushed it to 6 games, almost 7. So
I mean, the Knicks, there's a lot of talent on that team, too.
There is, but you got to think, right? Like Julius Randle was hurt in. Jalen Brunson playing 48 minutes, 2 games in a row is ridiculous, And then when your next leading scorer is Obi Toppin or Josh Hart, they're talented, but they're not the best, right? So I think a lot of it comes down to that as well, where it's just the Celtics just need to stay out of their own way. And I've interacted with Derek White's dad on Twitter a handful of times, and he's a great guy. He's funny as hell. And one thing he always preaches is control what you can control. And that's it. Right? And that's, I think, a motto the Celtics need to listen to. Before Game 7, we saw Tito Horford talking to JT. And whatever he said set something off inside that kid because he broke Steph Curry's Game 7 record 2 weeks after Steph Curry set the record. That's crazy.
Right.
So, it's almost like all the pieces are there. The puzzle is almost done. Just put those last 8 pieces together and you get a championship out of it.
Yeah, the control what you can control thing is huge because the Celtics, that's something that they've had trouble grasping and that they haven't really been able to, fully understand all the
Right.
time. Like you can't worry about what happens with everybody else. You just worry about what happens with you. And I've been saying this whole time when the Celtics play their best basketball, they can beat any team. And that's how I still feel, and I think I agree with you on the Western Conference. I said I think whoever comes out of the East this year wins it all. I think the East overall is just a stronger conference, not to discredit the two teams that are left in the West, like you said before, but I just think, you know, overall the East was a better conference. And I think the Celtics have more depth than any of the other teams that are remaining, regardless of who, they would face going forward. Do you, who do you think is going to come out of that series with the West? I mean, I think it's going to be a fantastic series. I think it's going to be really fun. There's a lot of superstars going that are in that series playing against each other right now. I'm still leaning towards Denver though.
I'm leaning towards Denver as well. I have Denver in 6. Um, and a lot of it doesn't even have to do with the team composition. I think more so, and we see this in the NFL a lot, right? Where like teams travel to Denver and they're fatigued. That, the mile high city for a reason is so draining on the body that it causes teams to, that aren't used to playing in that type of atmosphere to be, disadvantaged. And I don't like making excuses. I think it's a poor excuse. Like you're still a professional sports team. Like you got to go out and perform. But it is certainly a factor, especially when a game is every other day. So you're playing in, you're traveling to Denver today, playing there, you know, playing there again in 2 days, so you don't get to rest. Then you fly right back to LA. All that fatigue, I think, has a major, major part in it. And I think we saw that a lot in the Sun series with Denver, where, you know, Denver was like, hey, this is what's up. And Phoenix was like, okay, we can compete. We're good until game 6. And I
Yeah,
think
right.
we're going to see kind of a repeat of that with the Lakers. I mean, credit to the Lakers. I think that if they pulled it out in 7, I wouldn't be surprised. Um, you know, I just I think it's going to be really tough. LeBron being older and he takes great care of his body, but Tom Brady did the same thing and he struggled in Denver. You know what I mean? So like Cam Newton, same thing during the Super Bowl run that they had. They struggled in Denver. They struggled against Denver. I think it's just that whole, you know, sort of like I said, the atmosphere I think is a big player in it. Plus, when you have a guy like Jokic who's averaging a triple double and
Nuts.
he's doing it efficiently and unselfishly, I think is what's even crazier. So I got Nuggets in 6, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Lakers came out either. So, but
Yeah, no, I
Nuggets.
think it'll be a fun series for sure. Like I think
Yeah,
there's a lot of fun players to watch in that series. But yeah, I think the Nuggets pull it out, and I think we end up seeing a Celtics Nuggets finals, which I think would be super fun.
that was the second matchup I wanted. Truthfully, before all the drama with John Morant started, and before like all the injuries to Memphis, I wanted a Celtics Memphis finals
Yeah.
because I think the Memphis Grizzlies are a fun team to watch. I know everybody hates Dylan Brooks and John Morant's in all the trouble right now, but
Yeah.
um, you know if that all that stuff never happened, it would have been a fun series. But the Nuggets were my second pick out of the West because of the same thing. And I'm one of those people, I said it earlier, I hate blaming refs. I very much try not to do it. And I'm
Yeah, I
guilty
try
of it. I think we all are. Like, I think at some point we're like, oh, ref, you missed this. Or in baseball, that's a ball. That's not a strike.
It's so
So
true. We all do
we're
it.
all guilty of it. But um, the one thing about a Nuggets Celtics finals is I think it leaves the ref story out of it, right? Like obviously, if the Lakers get to the finals, there is going to be a factor of like, oh, LeBron got this
Yep.
2 extra calls, or Austin Reeves got these 4 extra free throws. Like,
So true.
but if it's the Nuggets and the Celtics, I think it's just pure hoops. I think it's just pure basketball, where it leaves the officiating out of it. to an extent, right? And that is what I want personally, is just good, pure hoops where everybody's playing well. And that's all I want.
That'd be a great finals too. Yeah, because then people can't be like, "Oh, the ref ruined the game," because we get that a lot too. With people on Twitter complaining, like, the ref ruined the momentum, or this team
Right.
got more calls, they should have lost, and that's just so much outside stuff that you don't really want when you want to just focus on good basketball in the finals.
Right. And yeah, I think, if we play the Nuggets in the finals, I think we beat them in 6. I think if we play the Lakers in the finals, we beat them in 7.
I was gonna say, I think it would take longer with the Lakers.
Oh, it would 100%, because like LeBron is, love him or hate him, he's still LeBron James. He is still one of the greatest basketball players ever. Like you
Exactly.
cannot. LeBron is the same thing as like Giannis or Steph Curry. Like if he is on your team, you
You have
cannot
a
count them
chance.
out. Yeah,
Yep.
exactly.
Yeah, like
And
even my friends who are Lakers fans, like I said the same thing to them. I was like, if you have LeBron on your team, you always have a shot.
yeah,
He's just one of those players.
100%.
But either way, I have high hopes for the Celtics. I really, really liked what I saw from them in game 7. Like you said, hopefully they had a little bit of a wake-up call when they faced Philly in terms of some of the things that they were doing that they can't do. But overall, I am definitely looking forward to the rest of this playoff run. I think they definitely have the best chance out of anybody left to go all the way. So let's hope for that parade to happen in Boston this year.
I will be there front and center.
Yeah, me too. I know, what a great feeling that would be. It's been so long for the Celtics.
It has. And the one last thing I want to touch upon is just like going back to Jason Tatum. People forget he's only 25 years old.
Yeah.
LeBron, Giannis, all these great players that we talk about, they didn't win their first rings until they were older than 27 years old. So if Jaylen Brown and Jason Tatum are able to do that this year, that's legacy defining, right?
Yeah.
We already see how talented these guys are. Both made All NBA. Jason Tatum, his resume at 25 years old is incredible. And if he's able to add a ring to it this year, I think he has a very storied career ahead of him.
Oh, 100%. It's just crazy to think about how young he is and what he's already doing and just how much more he has left to go. I'm just excited thinking about that, just his future and what else, he really has to give in his career.
Right.
Well, this was a lot of fun, Jared. I really, really appreciate, you joining my show. It's always really nice to talk to people who feel the same passion as me and go through the, ups and downs of being stressed during playoff games and just, having mental breakdowns of like, what is this team doing? So it's always nice to, get other people and hear those perspectives on, the team and what's going on.
Well, I'm so glad you had me on here. It was a ton of fun. And, I'd be more than happy to come back on the show again if you'll have me.
Yes.
Yeah,
Sure.
I mean, this was a blast. And you hit the nail on the head. Being able to have that kind of trauma dumping of your favorite team, just absolutely getting crushed is like, it's cathartic in a way.
No, it's so true. But yeah, so before we kind of close out here, just let everybody know where they can find you on social media.
Yeah, absolutely. So you can see it right there. At Jared0_NBA on both Twitter and Instagram. My Instagram is a little bare. I'm going to be working on getting that more tuned up soon. I have my own website called Energy Shift Sports. I'm working on getting that back up and running. I'm in the middle of, or with some help from my friend Lauren that I had shouted out earlier. She's helping me redesign the website to make it more Celtics themed, which is pretty exciting. So pretty soon I'm going to have a bunch of content up on there. So yeah, follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and look out for some of my new articles that are going to be coming.
Yeah, thank you so much. No, that's everybody definitely follow him, check out his content. As you can see, he definitely knows his basketball. So definitely support him, support his content. And again, I really appreciate you hopping on with me.
Thank you so much, Gabby, for the opportunity. I really do appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. And everybody, as always, thanks for tuning in to the show. Hope you all enjoy your week. Hope the Celtics, can finish off the rest of your week on a positive note. That is up to them. So we'll see what happens with them over the next few days. But go Celtics, and hope you all have a great rest of your night and a great rest of the week. Take care, everybody.